The dusty sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Mexico City's Bellas Artes concert hall, catching the floating specks in the air as Elena Fuentes moved her mop across the polished wooden floor. At 23, she had been working as a janitor here for almost 3 years, and she still felt a shiver every time she entered the empty concert hall in the early mornings or late evenings. This evening, the space felt especially magical. The last rays of sunset painted the white marble walls with golden light, and Elena found herself pausing, leaning on her mop to take in the beauty of it all. The grand piano stood center stage, its lid propped open, abandoned after today's rehearsal. From her vantage point, it looked like it was waiting for someone. Elena checked her watch. It was already past 8 and the building was empty except for the night security guard, who usually dozed at his desk until midnight. She had at least an hour before she needed to finish her rounds and clock out. She bit her lip, considering. She shouldn't, really. If anyone found out, she could lose her job. But the pull was too strong to resist, as it had been so many nights before. Carefully placing her mop against a nearby chair, Elena wiped her hands on her uniform and approached the stage. The 3 steps up felt like climbing a mountain, the invisible barrier between her world and the world of music. But once she stood beside the magnificent Steinway, all her doubts melted away. She settled onto the bench, adjusted its height with practiced ease, and placed her fingers lightly on the keys. The cool ivory welcomed her like an old friend. Elena closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the empty concert hall. Elena had never had formal lessons, but she'd been playing since she was a child, picking out melodies on her grandmother's old upright piano back in their small town outside Oaxaca. When her grandmother died and the piano had to be sold to pay for the funeral, Elena thought her music had died too. But then she got this job and discovered she could play after hours when no one was around. She learned by listening to the orchestra rehearse, by watching the pianist's fingers fly across the keys, by collecting discarded sheet music from the trash, and by spending countless hours practicing when the building was quiet. Elena lost herself in the music, her fingers dancing across the keys, coaxing out the passionate melody that had been trapped in her mind all day. After hearing the orchestra rehearse this very piece, she played with her whole body, swaying slightly, her face reflecting every emotional shift in the music. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows at the back of the hall. Maestro Anton Reinhardt had returned to retrieve the score he'd forgotten. Known for his brilliance and his biting temper in equal measure, the 50-something conductor had led orchestras around the world before taking on the challenge of elevating the Mexico City Philharmonic. His silver hair and piercing blue eyes gave him a distinguished appearance that matched his reputation. He had stopped dead in his tracks when he heard the piano. At first he'd been furious. Who dared to touch the carefully tuned concert grand? But as he listened, his anger turned to confusion, then to disbelief. The janitor was playing. And not just playing, she was performing Rachmaninoff with a raw, emotional quality that many trained pianists never achieved. Her technique wasn't perfect. He could spot the places where formal training would have smoothed out the rough edges, but there was something in her interpretation that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Elena reached the thunderous climax of the movement, her small frame somehow producing enough power to fill the hall with sound. As the final notes faded, she sat still for a moment, eyes closed, hands resting lightly on the keys. The silence was broken by slow, deliberate applause. Elena jumped up from the bench as if she'd been burned. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't fire me," she stammered, her face flushing with embarrassment and fear. Maestro Reinhardt walked slowly down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. "How long have you been playing my piano?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. Elena clutched her hands together nervously. "Sometimes. After everyone leaves," she admitted. "I always make sure my hands are clean and I never hurt the piano, I swear." "That's not what I asked," he said, climbing the steps to the stage. "How long have you been playing the piano?" "Period. Since I was 6, she replied. "My grandmother taught me the basics before she passed. Then I just taught myself." The maestro's eyebrows shot up. "Self-taught? And you're playing Rachmaninoff?" Elena looked at the floor. "I listen to the rehearsals, and I find sheet music sometimes that people throw away." Reinhardt circled the piano, studying her. This small young woman in her gray janitor's uniform, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her warm brown eyes now filled with worry, was nothing like the conservatory students he usually dealt with. "Play something else," he commanded. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Play something else. Anything you know." Elena hesitated, then slowly sat back down at the piano. Her mind raced through the pieces she knew well enough to play under this kind of pressure. Finally, she began Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Her fingers trembling slightly at first, then gaining confidence as the music took over. Reinhardt watched her intently, noting how she hunched slightly over the keys. No teacher had ever corrected her posture, yet somehow maintained the flexibility in her wrists that many trained pianists struggled to achieve. Her phrasing was intuitive rather than learned, and all the more affecting for it. When she finished, he said nothing for a long moment. "Am I fired?" Elena finally asked in a small voice. A strange smile crossed his face. "No, Miss Fuentes." "Elena Fuentes." "No, Miss Fuentes, you're not fired. But I am curious." He tapped his fingers against the piano's glossy surface. "Would you play like that in front of an audience?" Elena's eyes widened. I don't understand." "It's a simple question. Anyone can play when they're alone. The real test is whether you can perform when people are watching, when the pressure is on." "I've never played for anyone except my family," she admitted. Reinhardt nodded as if she had confirmed something for him, as I suspected. "Well then." The next morning, Elena arrived for her shift early as usual. She was surprised to find the orchestra already assembled for rehearsal. She tried to slip in quietly with her cleaning cart, intending to work in the lobby until they finished, but a voice called out to her. "Ah, Miss Fuentes. Perfect timing." Maestro Reinhardt gestured for her to approach the stage. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet someone." Elena froze, her heart pounding. The entire orchestra, nearly 80 musicians, turned to stare at her. She recognized many of their faces. She cleaned around them almost every day, invisible as only maintenance staff can be. But now they were all looking directly at her, curiosity and confusion evident in their expressions. "This is Elena Fuentes," Reinhardt announced. "She works here as a janitor, but I discovered something interesting last night." He paused dramatically. "Ms. Fuentes is a pianist." A murmur went through the orchestra. Elena felt her face burning. The first violinist, a woman with sharp features and perfectly styled hair, looked Elena up and down with obvious skepticism. "In fact," Reinhardt continued, "I found her playing Rachmaninoff on this very piano yesterday evening. Quite impressively, I might add, for someone with no formal training." Now the murmurs grew louder. The concert pianist who performed regularly with the orchestra, a heavy-set man named Luis Ortega, frowned deeply. "That's impossible," he said. "Rachmaninoff requires years of training. That's what makes it interesting, doesn't it?" Reinhardt replied with a thin smile. He turned back to Elena. "Our upcoming concert in 3 weeks includes some solo piano pieces. I think our audience might enjoy a special addition to the program." "What are you suggesting, Maestro?" asked the orchestra manager, looking concerned. "I'm suggesting a challenge." Reinhardt focused his intense gaze on Elena. "Miss Fuentes, I dare you to prepare a piece to perform at our concert. Show everyone what you can really do." The orchestra erupted in surprised exclamations. Luis Ortega stood up from his piano bench, clearly outraged. "This is absurd. You can't seriously be suggesting putting an untrained janitor on stage at a professional concert." Elena felt like she might faint. "Perform in front of a real audience? In just 3 weeks? I couldn't," she stammered. "I don't belong on stage." "That's what we're going to find out, isn't it?" Reinhardt said. His eyes held a challenge, but there was something else there too. A glint of excitement, perhaps even belief. A young woman in the violin section spoke up. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said, earning glares from several of her colleagues. "Music should be about talent and passion, not just credentials." "This isn't a talent show," snapped the first violinist. "This is a professional orchestra with standards." Reinhardt held up his hand for silence. "The decision is made. Ms. Fuentes will prepare Liszt's La Campanella for our concert." Even Elena, with her limited formal knowledge, knew of this piece, one of the most technically challenging in the piano repertoire. Her heart sank. He was setting her up to fail. "Unless, of course," Reinhardt added, looking directly at her, "you're not up to the challenge." Something stirred inside Elena, a mix of fear, indignation, and perhaps a tiny spark of hope. All her life, people had told her what she couldn't do, what wasn't possible for someone like her. Maybe it was time to find out what was possible. "I'll do it," she said quietly, then more firmly. "I'll play." Reinhardt smiled, satisfaction evident on his face. "Excellent. You'll have access to this piano every evening for practice, and I expect to hear your progress in 1 week." As Elena backed away, she could feel the eyes of every musician on her. Some curious, some dismissive, some openly hostile. What had she just agreed to? And why did the maestro look so pleased with himself? She didn't notice the small crowd of administrative staff who had gathered in the back of the hall, or the marketing director quickly typing notes into her phone about the unexpected publicity opportunity that had just fallen into their laps. All Elena knew was that in 3 weeks, her life would never be the same, whether she triumphed or failed spectacularly in front of the entire city. Elena's hands shook as she locked the door of her tiny apartment behind her. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and took several deep breaths. What had she done? Agreeing to play at a professional concert was madness. She would embarrass herself completely. "Mama, is that you?" A sleepy voice called from the small bedroom. Elena composed herself quickly. "Yes, Luca. Sorry I'm late." Her 16-year-old brother appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Though 4 inches taller than Elena now, he still looked like the little boy she'd practically raised after their parents died in a car accident 6 years ago. "There's soup on the stove," he said. "I saved you some." Elena smiled gratefully. Luca was a good kid, studying hard during the day and working part-time at a grocery store in the evenings. Between his schedule and hers, they barely saw each other some days. "Something happened at work," she said as she reheated the soup. "Something unexpected." Luca sat at their small kitchen table, suddenly alert. "Did you get fired?" No, she assured him quickly. "Actually, I've been invited to play piano." "At a concert." Luca's eyes widened. "A real concert? Like on stage?" Elena nodded, still hardly believing it herself. "The conductor heard me playing after hours." "That's amazing." Luca jumped up and hugged her. Abuela would be so proud. The mention of their grandmother brought tears to Elena's eyes. Abuela Rosa had been the one to notice 5-year-old Elena picking out melodies by ear on the old upright piano in the corner of their home in Oaxaca. Though they could never afford proper lessons, Abuela taught Elena what little she knew herself, basic scales and chords, how to read simple sheet music, and most importantly, how to play with heart. "She always said you were meant for something special," Luca continued, his face glowing with excitement. "And now look. When is the concert?" 3 weeks, Elena said, the reality of the timeline hitting her again. "And Luca, the piece they want me to play is really difficult. One of the hardest pieces ever written." His smile never faltered. "You'll learn it. You always do." Elena wished she shared his confidence. That night, after Luca went to bed, she found recordings of La Campanella online and listened with growing dread. The piece was a technical nightmare. Blindingly fast runs, huge leaps between notes, and trills that seemed humanly impossible. She had never attempted anything this difficult before. The next day, Elena arrived at work early, determined to see the sheet music for herself. The orchestra librarian, an older woman named Valentina who had always been kind to her, hesitated when Elena requested the score. "La Campanella. That's what Maestro Reinhardt wants you to play?" Valentina asked, looking concerned. Elena nodded. "Oh, my dear," Valentina sighed. "That man has always had a flair for drama, but this—" She shook her head. "Wait here." She disappeared into the archives and returned with several sheets of music. "Here's the score, but I'm also giving you something else. Liszt's Consolation Number 3. It's much more accessible, but still beautiful. Perhaps you could convince him to let you play this instead." Elena thanked her and tucked both scores into her bag. Later, during her lunch break, she found an empty practice room in the basement of the concert hall, a small windowless space with an old upright piano that the orchestra musicians rarely used. She spread out the La Campanella score and tried to make sense of the black notes crowding the page. Starting slowly, she picked out the opening melody. Even at a fraction of the required speed, her fingers stumbled over the patterns. After 30 minutes, she'd managed just the first few measures, and her forearms already ached. It's hopeless, she whispered to herself. Nothing is hopeless with the right approach. Elena jumped at the voice. Standing in the doorway was a young woman with a violin case. The same violinist who had supported her during yesterday's confrontation. I'm Sophia, the woman said with a friendly smile. Mind if I join you? Elena moved over on the bench and Sophia sat beside her, setting her violin case on the floor. You're really going to do this? Sophia asked, looking at the intimidating score. I don't think I have a choice now, Elena replied. Everyone would just laugh if I backed out. Sophia studied her for a moment. That's not why you're doing it, though, is it? Elena thought about it. No, she admitted. I'm doing it because I've always wondered what might have happened if I'd had the chance to study music properly. This feels like my one opportunity to find out. Sophia nodded. I understand that. My family sacrificed everything to send me to conservatory. She pointed to the music. Let me help you break this down into manageable parts. For the next 20 minutes, Sophia explained the structure of the piece, pointing out recurring patterns and showing Elena practice techniques to build up speed gradually. Her kindness was unexpected. Most of the orchestra members had been giving Elena cold looks all day. Why are you helping me? Elena asked finally. Sophia shrugged. Maybe I'm tired of seeing the same people get all the opportunities. Or maybe I just like underdogs, she smiled. Besides, you should have seen Luis Ortega's face when you accepted the challenge. He's been insufferable since he won that competition in Vienna last year. Their laughter was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Maestro Reinhardt stood there, his expression unreadable. Ms. Fuentes, Ms. Navarro. He nodded to each of them. Interesting to find you two together. His eyes fell on the music. Ah, getting started, I see. Good. And how are you finding Liszt's Little Bell piece? It's challenging, Elena admitted. Indeed. Reinhardt stepped into the room. Sophia, I believe the strings have sectional rehearsal in 5 minutes. Sophia took the hint. She gathered her violin and squeezed Elena's hand encouragingly before leaving. Alone with the maestro, Elena felt her nervousness return. Reinhardt circled the small piano, examining it with distaste. This won't do, he declared. You'll need a better instrument for practice. This is fine, Elena said quickly. I'm used to. The small recital hall is unused between 6 and 8 each evening. Reinhardt interrupted. The piano there is a Yamaha Grand. Not our best instrument, but serviceable. I've arranged for you to have access. Elena stared at him in surprise. Thank you, she said cautiously. Reinhardt waved away her thanks. I expect progress, Ms. Fuentes, rapid progress. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. My colleagues think I've lost my mind. Some believe I'm deliberately setting you up to fail for publicity. I'd very much like to prove them wrong. With that cryptic statement, he was gone, leaving Elena to wonder about his true motives. That evening, Elena found the recital hall unlocked as promised. The Yamaha grand piano gleamed under the soft lights, its lid propped fully open. It was smaller than the concert grand on the main stage, but still far superior to any instrument she'd ever practiced on regularly. She approached it reverently, running her fingers lightly over the fall board before sitting down. The keys felt like silk beneath her fingers as she began to play. For 2 hours, she worked methodically through the first page of La Campanella, breaking down each measure as Sophia had shown her. Progress was painfully slow, but by the end of the session, she could play the opening section at half speed without major mistakes. As she gathered her things to leave, she noticed movement in the back of the hall. Maestro Reinhardt stepped out of the shadows. You've been here the whole time? She asked, startled. Not the whole time, he replied, but enough to observe your method. He approached the piano. Your technique is unorthodox, but not without merit. Your hands are small for this piece, though. Elena looked down at her hands self-consciously. That's not a criticism, Reinhardt said, merely an observation. You'll need to adjust some of the fingerings. He demonstrated a passage, his long fingers spanning the intervals easily. Try it this way. Elena copied his movement, finding it slightly more comfortable. Better, he nodded. You're musical, Ms. Fuentes, that much is clear. But musicality alone won't conquer Liszt. Why did you choose this piece? Elena asked. Why not something possible? Reinhardt's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Where's the story in that? Story? Yes, Ms. Fuentes. People don't come to concerts merely to hear notes played correctly. They come for the story. His eyes held a calculating gleam. And you, the cleaning woman with a hidden gift attempting one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire. That is a story they will pay to witness. Elena felt a flash of anger. So I am publicity. Everyone is publicity in one form or another, Reinhardt replied coolly. The question is whether you'll use this opportunity or let it use you. He gestured to the piano. You have access to this instrument every day. Sofia Navarro seems eager to help you, though I'd advise discretion. Not everyone in the orchestra shares her enthusiasm. Our marketing department has already begun promoting your appearance. Already? Elena felt her stomach drop. But what if I can't learn it in time? Then the story will have a different ending, Reinhardt said simply. But ticket sales have already increased by 15% since this morning's announcement. The weight of expectations settled heavily on Elena's shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore. The orchestra's management clearly had financial motives for this unusual addition to their program. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Elena would arrive early for her regular cleaning shift, work through the day, then practice on the recital hall piano for 2 hours before going home exhausted. Sofia continued to offer guidance during lunch breaks, teaching Elena music theory concepts she'd never formally learned. Word spread quickly about the janitor who would be performing with the orchestra. Local newspapers picked up the story, and a reporter even showed up at the concert hall hoping to interview her. The marketing director intercepted them, much to Elena's relief. A week after accepting the challenge, Elena was summoned to Reinhardt's office. The maestro was on the phone when she entered, speaking in rapid German. He motioned for her to sit while he finished his call. Our donors are intrigued by your story, he said after hanging up. One has even offered to fund a scholarship for you at the National Conservatory if your performance meets expectations. Elena's heart leaped at this news, then immediately sank. And if I fail? Then life continues as before, Reinhardt said matter-of-factly. You'll have had your moment on stage, which is more than most people ever get. He leaned forward. Tell me, Ms. Fuentes, why did you begin playing the piano? The question caught her off guard. My grandmother's piano was the center of our home, she said after a moment. When she played, everything felt right with the world. I wanted to create that feeling too. Reinhardt nodded slowly. And when you play now, when no one is watching, how does it feel? Elena thought about those precious moments alone at the piano. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Hold on to that feeling, Reinhardt said. You'll need it when you walk onto that stage. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination for Elena. Her days began at 4:30 a.m., when she would wake up to practice on a paper keyboard she had drawn on cardboard, silently moving her fingers through the patterns of La Campanella while Luca still slept. By 6 a.m. she was at the bus stop, often fighting to keep her eyes open during the 40-minute commute to the concert hall. From 7 a.m. until 3 p.m., she completed her regular cleaning duties, stealing moments between tasks to study the score she now carried everywhere. Then from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., she practiced on the grand piano in the recital hall, before catching the bus home to make a late dinner for herself and Luca. Each night, she fell into bed after midnight, her fingers still twitching with the day's practice, only to start the cycle again a few hours later. The physical toll was becoming visible. Dark circles under her eyes, hands cramping unexpectedly, shoulders tight with tension. You look terrible, Sofia said bluntly one day, finding Elena dozing off during her lunch break in the practice room. Elena jerked awake, nearly knocking over her untouched sandwich. I'm fine, she insisted automatically. Sofia sat next to her on the piano bench. No, you're not. You're working yourself to exhaustion, and exhaustion leads to mistakes. She took Elena's hands and turned them over, examining them critically. Your tendons are inflamed. You'll injure yourself if you keep this up. I don't have a choice, Elena said. The concert is in 9 days and I'm still struggling with the middle section. Sofia shook her head. You need to work smarter, not harder. Quality practice over quantity. She pulled out a small container from her bag. My grandmother's salve for musicians' hands. Rub it in tonight, Elena accepted the gift gratefully. How's the orchestra taking all this? She asked. She had been so focused on her own preparation that she'd barely noticed the increasingly curious looks from musicians as they passed her in the hallways. Sofia laughed softly. There are three camps: those who think you'll crash and burn, those who are secretly hoping you succeed to shake things up, and those who are just annoyed at all the extra attention the concert is getting because of you. And Luis Ortega? He's in a camp of his own, Sophia said dryly. He's demanding to review your performance before the concert to maintain the orchestra's standards. The maestro told him to mind his own program. Elena winced. I don't want to cause problems. You're not the problem, Sophia assured her. This place needed a wake-up call. We've been playing the same repertoire to the same aging audience for years. Ticket sales have been dropping steadily. She smiled mischievously. But this concert? Completely sold out. Sold out? Elena echoed, a fresh wave of panic washing over her. Don't think about that part, Sophia advised, seeing her expression. Now show me how far you've gotten. Elena placed her tired hands on the keys and began to play. She could now perform the first third of the piece at nearly full tempo, her fingers flying through the rapid passages with growing confidence. But as she reached the middle section with its treacherous hand crossings, she faltered, hitting several wrong notes before stopping in frustration. Sorry, she muttered. I always mess up there. You're thinking too hard, Sophia observed. Your body tenses right before that passage. You're anticipating the difficulty. She demonstrated something on the piano, not the notes themselves, but a different approach to the hand position. Try preparing your hand earlier like this. Elena copied the movement and, to her surprise, made it through the troublesome section with fewer mistakes. That's it, Sophia encouraged. Again, but slower. They worked together for the remainder of Elena's break, and by the end, she had a new strategy for the problematic passage. As Sophia packed up to leave for rehearsal, Elena caught her arm. Why are you being so kind to me? You barely know me. Sophia was quiet for a moment. My first teacher was a cleaning woman, she said finally. She worked at my elementary school in Guadalajara, but she had studied violin in her youth. She noticed me trying to play a plastic recorder during recess and offered to teach me after school. For 2 years, she gave me lessons for free until I was good enough to earn a scholarship. Her eyes grew distant with the memory. Without her, I would never have found my way to music. What happened to her? Elena asked. She died before I graduated from the conservatory, Sophia said softly. I never got to show her what her kindness made possible. She smiled at Elena. Maybe this is my chance to pay it forward. The door opened abruptly, breaking the moment. Maestro Reinhardt stood there, his tall figure blocking the light from the hallway. Ms. Navarro, you're late for rehearsal, he said, his voice crisp. Sophia gathered her violin case. Apologies, Maestro. I was just leaving. She gave Elena an encouraging nod before slipping past Reinhardt into the hallway. The conductor watched her go, then turned his attention to Elena. Stand up, he ordered. Elena rose from the piano bench, puzzled. Walk to the door and back, he instructed. Even more confused, Elena complied, walking self-consciously to the door and back to the piano. Again, but imagine you're walking onto the stage of the main concert hall. 2,000 people are watching you. Elena took a deep breath and tried to imagine it. Her steps immediately became tentative, her shoulders hunching slightly. No, Reinhardt said sharply. Chin up, eyes forward. Walk with purpose. Elena straightened her spine and tried again. Better, he acknowledged, but still not right. He demonstrated himself walking with quiet confidence and poise. You must own the stage from the moment you appear. Hesitation communicates fear, and the audience will sense it immediately. I'm afraid, Elena admitted. Of course you are, Reinhardt replied matter-of-factly. Everyone is afraid before they perform. The difference is whether you allow the fear to show. He gestured for her to try again. From your entrance to your exit, you are not Elena Fuentes, the cleaning woman. You are Elena Fuentes, the pianist. They practiced the walk several more times, with Reinhardt correcting the slightest drop in her shoulders or uncertainty in her steps. Finally, he seemed satisfied. Now play the beginning of the piece, he instructed. Elena returned to the piano and played the opening of La Campanella. Despite her fatigue, her fingers found the notes easily, this part at least. She knew well. Reinhardt listened with his eyes closed. When she finished the section, he nodded. Your technique is improving, he said. But you're still playing Liszt's notes, not making them your own. I don't understand, Elena said, frustration creeping into her voice. Either I play the right notes or I don't. Reinhardt sat beside her on the bench. Technical accuracy is the bare minimum, he explained. But music exists in the space between the notes, in how you connect them, shape them, breathe with them. He played a simple phrase, then played it again with subtle differences in timing and emphasis. The same note suddenly told a different story. That's what I can't teach you, he said. That must come from inside you. How? Elena asked, desperate for concrete guidance. Reinhardt considered her question. What does this music say to you? Not what you think Liszt wanted it to say. What does it say to Elena Fuentes? She thought about it. Really thought about it for perhaps the first time. She had been so focused on playing the right notes that she hadn't stopped to consider what they meant to her. It sounds like celebration, she said slowly, but with an edge of desperation, like someone determined to find joy even when life is hard. She looked up at him uncertainly. Is that right? There is no right interpretation, Reinhardt said. There is only truth. If that's what you hear in the music, then play it that way. He stood up. I'll leave you to your practice. And Miss Fuentes? Get some rest. Your hands need time to absorb what your mind has learned. After he left, Elena remained at the piano, thinking about what he'd said. For the first time since accepting this challenge, she allowed herself to play not just for accuracy, but for feeling. The music began to transform under her fingers, becoming something personal, something that belonged to her despite being written by someone else over a century ago. That night, instead of practicing until she could barely keep her eyes open, Elena went to bed early. As she drifted off to sleep, she could hear the music in her mind, not as isolated fragments to be conquered, but as a complete artistic statement. The following week brought both progress and setbacks. Elena could now play through the entire piece, though still not perfectly and not always at full speed. Sophia continued to offer technical advice during stolen moments between rehearsals, and occasionally Reinhardt would appear during Elena's evening practice sessions to critique her interpretation. News of her upcoming performance had spread beyond the concert hall. A local television station sent a crew to film a short segment about her, though management kept them away from Elena herself, wanting to maintain the mystery until the concert. Posters around the city now featured her name alongside the orchestra's, and the marketing department had created a special program insert with her photo and brief biography. The pressure was mounting daily. Elena overheard two violinists discussing her as she cleaned near the rehearsal room. It's a publicity stunt, one said dismissively. She'll play a watered-down version everyone will applaud politely, and it will be forgotten in a week. I don't know, the other replied. Sophia says she's actually quite good. Good isn't enough for Liszt. This is embarrassing for the orchestra. We're not a charity. Elena moved away, their words stinging despite her attempts to ignore them. That evening, as she practiced, the doubts crept in, causing her to make mistakes in passages she had previously mastered. By the end of her session, she felt worse than she had in days. As she packed up to leave, she found Maestro Reinhardt waiting by the door. 3 days, he said simply. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the knot of anxiety in her throat. Are you ready? He asked. No, she admitted. I don't think I'll ever be ready. To her surprise, Reinhardt smiled slightly. Then you understand what it means to be an artist. He handed her a small envelope. Your pass for the stage door on concert night. Don't be late. As Elena took the envelope, the reality of what was about to happen finally hit her full force. In 3 days, she would walk onto that stage, alone, and attempt to play one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire in front of 2,000 people. And nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The morning of the concert, Elena woke before her alarm. She had barely slept, drifting in and out of troubled dreams where she walked onto stage only to find her hands had disappeared, or the piano keys turned to water beneath her fingers. Now she lay still, watching the early light filter through the thin curtains of her bedroom window, listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment building coming to life. Today was the day. After 3 weeks of more intense work than she had ever experienced, she would either triumph or fail spectacularly in front of the most important audience in Mexico City. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Don't practice today. Rest your hands and mind. See you tonight. You'll be amazing. Elena smiled at her friend's encouragement, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. She got up quietly, careful not to wake Luca, and made herself a cup of tea. Her brother had been so supportive, telling everyone at school and his job about his sister who would be playing with the city's orchestra. Last night he had presented her with a small gift, a delicate silver hairpin that had belonged to their grandmother. "Abuela would want you to wear it," he had said, his young face serious. For luck, now Elena held the hairpin, running her finger along its subtle pattern. She would wear it tonight, a small piece of her grandmother with her on stage. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Elena had been given the day off from her cleaning duties, but now she almost wished for the distraction of work. She tried to rest as Sophia had advised, but her mind kept racing through the piece, imagining all the places she might make mistakes. By late afternoon, she could bear it no longer. She decided to walk to the nearby park, hoping the fresh air and movement would calm her nerves. The park was busy with families enjoying the weekend, children laughing and playing, couples strolling hand in hand. Normal life continuing all around her while she felt suspended between her old life and whatever would come after tonight. As she sat on a bench watching a group of pigeons, an elderly man set up a small portable keyboard nearby and began to play folk songs. Elena listened, drawn to the simple joy in his playing. He wasn't technically perfect, but he played with heart, and passers-by stopped to listen, some dropping coins into his hat. Something about his unself-conscious performance touched her. He played purely for the love of it, without fear of judgment. Elena found herself thinking back to when she first started playing on her grandmother's piano, before she understood how difficult music could be, when it was simply a source of happiness. By the time she returned home to prepare for the concert, something had shifted within her. The fear was still there, but alongside it was something new, a quiet determination to play tonight, not just to prove herself, but for the pure joy of making music. Luca helped her get ready, ironing her best white blouse while she showered. They had discussed what she should wear, lacking anything resembling formal concert attire. "Just be yourself," Luca had decided. "You're not pretending to be something you're not." So Elena dressed in her nicest black pants, the white blouse and a simple blue cardigan that had been their mother's. She pulled her hair back in a neat bun, securing it with her grandmother's silver pin. No flowing gown or elaborate jewelry, just Elena Fuentes as she truly was. As they rode the bus to the concert hall, Luca chatted excitedly about who might be in the audience, while Elena sat quietly, mentally reviewing the piece one last time. When they arrived at the imposing building, its marble facade lit dramatically for the evening performance, Luca squeezed her hand. "I'll see you after," he said. "I'll be the one cheering loudest." Elena hugged him tightly, drawing strength from his unwavering belief in her, then watched him join the line of concert-goers entering through the main doors. She made her way around to the stage door, where a security guard checked her pass and directed her backstage. The backstage area was a flurry of activity. Musicians in formal black attire warming up, stagehands moving equipment, administrative staff rushing about with clipboards and headsets. Elena stood uncertainly in the midst of it all, suddenly feeling very out of place. These people all belonged here. She didn't. "Elena!" Sophia appeared, resplendent in her concert black dress, violin case in hand. "You came." "I was worried you might change your mind." "I considered it," Elena admitted. Sophia laughed. "Well, I'm glad you didn't. Come on, I'll show you where to wait." She led Elena to a small green room where a few other soloists were preparing. Luis Ortega sat in the corner, going through his own piano piece with precise finger movements on his knees. He looked up as they entered, his expression souring when he saw Elena. "So the janitor actually showed up," he said, just loud enough to be heard. "How touching." Sophia stiffened beside her, but Elena placed a hand on her arm. "It's okay," she whispered. She wasn't going to let anyone shake her confidence now. Sophia reluctantly left to join the orchestra for the first half of the program. Elena found a quiet chair in the corner and closed her eyes, listening to the muted sounds of the orchestra tuning up on stage, the buzz of the audience filling the hall beyond. A stage manager appeared. 10 minutes, Ms. Fuentes. You'll be the third piece after intermission."